All right, so another beautiful day at Rockaway. I'm at the north end this time. I'm planning to do another experimental painting, just play around. The wind is picking up, so I'm gonna have to work quickly. So here's the scene I'm working with. Quite a bit of energy in the water today, so I'm gonna try to capture that. I've got my usual palette of colors, but I did squeeze out some extra paint. I've got some yellow ochre, some permanent red medium from Rembrandt, and some cerulean blue pure. And I've got an assortment of palette knives here. The usual collection of brushes, mostly gonna be using natural bristle flats, number 6 and 8. And I'm gonna paint over an old 12 by 16 inch panel. Sketching in burnt sienna, just thinning with odorless mineral spirits. I'm gonna go with a high horizon, probably at about 1/3 from the top. And then there's some rocks over here. It'll come out this way. I know this is very confusing. Something like that, and then there'll be waves in here. All right, for the sky, I've got a mixture of warm white and cerulean blue pure. When I'm painting over an old painting, I just want to eliminate the previous image as quickly as possible by focusing on big shapes. For the ocean, I'm going with burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, a touch of cadmium yellow medium, and some warm white. The value of the water is actually pretty dark, and I've noticed that that's the case, especially on days when there's bright sunlight. When it's overcast, the values tend to be in a narrower range. All right, added some warm white and cadmium yellow medium, warming up the color of the ocean as it gets closer to shore. And then actually in this area here, it appears to be some white water that's almost purple in color. All right, for the white water, I've got warm white, ultramarine blue, and a touch of alizarin crimson. I'm just kind of scrubbing this on. I don't mind if I get some blending in here, that's okay. I'm kind of concerned about having white water like this at the bottom of the panel, just because I don't want it to draw the eye down to the bottom, but we'll see. It may not be a problem. All right, I've got a dark mixture of ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and some alizarin crimson. In last week's painting, I was talking about leaving some transparency in my darks, but then I got a little bit carried away. I was having so much fun with the palette knife that I actually painted over the transparent areas. So we'll see. I'm not guaranteeing that I'm not going to do the same thing. And I'm just squinting at the scene, looking for the darkest darks at this point. And I'm looking for repeating patterns. Like, I don't want this to be a repeating pattern here, like where this goes down and then this goes down like that. So there are some rocks, so that might break up that pattern. Maybe also shift the direction of this rock a little bit. All right, I've added a little bit of yellow ochre to the dark mixture, and maybe I'll add a touch of cadmium yellow medium as well. There are some warm areas in the shadow portions of the rock, so I'm trying to add those. All right, so for the portion of the rocks that's in the light, I've got yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and some ultramarine blue. First step when painting over an old panel is just get the panel covered, eliminate the old painting. And I try to keep the paint fairly thin so I can apply color on top. And often I will leave little bits of the old painting showing through. We'll see if that happens. Actually, I'm noticing that it's going to be hard to preserve transparency. And the reason is that when I'm painting over an old panel, there's no absorbency, so it's difficult to maintain transparency, but that's okay. I'm not worried about that. That's just the way it goes. Again, I like painting over old panels just because it sets me free creatively. I don't worry whether the painting comes out or not, and I just can play around and experiment. All right, I feel like I want this rock to actually come down a bit lower. Maybe like that. All right, so I like the big shapes, but I do need to work on a whitewater pattern here. I'm squeezing out some titanium white because I want to have some cool white on my palette as well. I try to apply the whitewater in a spontaneous fluid fashion, imitating the flow of the water. Now I'm going to go over this whitewater with thicker paint, but for now I just want to sort of see what the value looks like, and then also look for an interesting wave pattern. I think I came up too high with the whitewater over here. I might want to have it sort of like this, where it's higher over on this side, kind of mix in some darker paint here. All right, that's better, I think. I'm mostly just thinking about design at this point. And that's why it can be so messy. It doesn't really matter. My focus is on shapes. All right, so there's a distant fog bank out here. I'm actually gonna use the fog bank to carve away at this rock a little bit. I want this opening to be a bit bigger. For the fog, I've used ultramarine blue, titanium white, and a bit of burnt sienna. All right, I added some titanium white and alizarin crimson for the base of the fog. Trying to keep the value dark enough that it doesn't compete with the whitewater, and also dark enough to be able to get some saturation. I think I want the fog to come up a little bit higher towards the right. There's some guano on the top of this rock, sort of light passages that I might want to add, and so having a dark background will help that stand out. I also want to keep the shape of this fog irregular. All right, for the cerulean portion of the sky, I've got phthalo blue, warm white, and a touch of cadmium yellow medium. I'm noticing since using the palette knife last week, I'm applying more paint even when I'm painting with a brush. It's kind of interesting. It's one of the things that I liked about the palette knife was how much paint I was able to apply. So now I'm trying to get a similar effect while using the brush. And there are areas that are darker in the fog, so just adding a little variety in value here. All right, I think I want the dark fog also to run right off the top over here. Something like that. So I used a straight edge for the horizon here, and I'm noticing that the water in the distance is a very dark blue, but there's also quite a bit of red in the water, so I added some alizarin crimson to the mix as well. All right, grabbing some cerulean blue pure, and in the spirit of experimentation and play, I'm just going to add that directly on here. See how thick I can get the paint just using a brush. All right, I'm going to build upon this whitewater pattern and just add a dark portion of the wave. I'm going to add a bit of warmth in there from the rock mixture, just because I'm seeing some warm colors in the waves as they rise up. All right, I've got a light greenish mixture here for the portion of the waves that are breaking, and maybe put some of those tones in the whitewater as well. Some vertical energy like this. I'm really trying to keep the brush loaded, maybe a little bit right here as well. And I'll be coming back over this to touch up some of the whitewater. All right, adding some thicker paint, just using some gray greens that I've got on the palette already. Adding some lighter greens out here, and I don't mind if they mix with the paint underneath a little bit. So I'm mostly seeing it out here. Once I get into this area, not as much, but I am seeing some warm areas in these waves that I want to exaggerate. All right, and maybe some of that warm green in here as well. So now I want to add some sky reflections on the water. And the key to this is making sure that you get the right value. A lot of times what I end up doing is painting these sky reflections too light. I'm going to try not to do that today. All right, I'm noticing some titanium white and blue in the water over here as well, in this lower corner. The water is pretty choppy out here, so I want to make sure that I don't tame it down too much. I want to make sure that I capture some of that chaotic energy. want to touch up the white water here, so I've got the brush really loaded. Maybe add some over here as well. Trying to keep it spontaneous. There's a lot of white water in this area, so I want to add some of that. This seems a bit too tame here, so let me add some energy to this wave. Adding some light blue above this wave in the front. All right, let's see what the palette knife can do. Maybe I'll add a bit of palette knife over here as well. And just try to keep it on the thicker portions. I'd add it on this wave here. I might have to brush this out because I'm not crazy about the way it looks. All right, down here as well. All right, ultramarine blue and titanium white. Maybe just glide this over the water. For sky reflections. I had some cool things going with the brush, but I've lost them. That's okay. I just scraped down this area. I feel like I lost the design. And this painting may end up being a crash and burn experience. We'll see, and that's okay if it is. Now I want to add back some thicker paint, and I think I'm going to stick with the brush. But I do have some nice effects from the palette knife that I'll leave. Possibly nice, I'm not sure. All right, adding some color to the rocks in the foreground. Quite a variety of warm rust colors, but they do tend to get less saturated as they go off in the distance. All right, I want to make sure I don't make these values too light. Sometimes when you're trying to add a feeling of light, you'll just keep lightening up the mix. And I think in this case what I need to do is just warm it up and not lighten it up, because if I lighten it up too much, I'll lose the value structure. All right, I'm going to add the lighter portions I'm seeing on these rocks, but I'm going to tone it down a little bit from what I'm actually seeing, because in real life it's about as bright as the white water, but I don't want that. I want to keep it a little bit darker in value than the white water. All right, some out on these rocks here. All right, so here's what I finished up with. I ended up using a brush for most of this painting. I did apply some paint with a palette knife, but ended up scraping it down. I did not like the way it looked. I lived with last week's palette knife painting, and although there's some things I really liked about it, I still prefer the look of brushed paint. So what I ended up doing is trying to apply similar quantities of paint, but using a brush. And I do think that the thick paint does really help to communicate some energy and motion in the water. The thick paint also helps with saturation, and so I think there's some nice saturated colors in this painting. One thing I noticed is that I could actually have pushed the warmth in these rocks a bit more. In person, I'd like these to be a little bit brighter. While I was painting it, I felt like I was going overboard and maybe pushing it too much, but now that I've got it inside, I realized that actually I could have pushed it even a bit more. But overall, I am satisfied with this painting. I feel like it did capture the energy and the essence of the scene. Alright, so hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to see some extra videos and help support the channel, there's a Patreon link down below. It's the Patreon support that helps keep me making these videos, and it's much appreciated, so check it out. Other than that, stay creative, and I'll see you guys in the next video.